Good day, everyone. I'm Gemma Okotoner of Kalayaan National High School, and I will be your teacher for today's lesson. At the end of the lesson, you will be able to use properties of congruence in identifying congruent parts and congruent figures. Our topic for today is about using properties of congruence in identifying congruent parts and congruent figures. Before we start the lesson, try to answer the given activity. Simply match column A to column B. Write the letter of your choice. How did you find the activity? Were you able to match it correctly? Let us check your answer. For number 1, the answer is C. For number 2, we have A. And for number 3, that is B. From the activity done, you were able to identify the different properties of congruence which is needed in the next lesson. How are we going to use properties of congruence in identifying congruent parts and congruent figures? To find the answer, let's proceed to the next session. There are 3 properties of congruence. We have reflexive property, symmetric property, and transitive property of congruence. What do you mean by reflexive property of congruence? So we have the definition. Reflexive property of congruence is that a segment, an angle, a triangle, or any other shape is always congruent or equal to itself. We have the example. Segment AB is congruent or equal to segment AB. Angle A is congruent or equal to angle A. How about symmetric property of congruence? So again, we have the definition. Symmetric property of congruence is that if a figure, call it figure A, is congruent or equal to another figure, call it figure B, then the figure B is also congruent or equal to figure A. The example for that is, if segment AB is congruent to segment CD, then segment CD is congruent to segment AB. Another one we have, if angle A is congruent to angle B, then angle B is congruent to angle A. How about transitive property of congruence? So we have the definition. Transitive property of congruence is that if a figure, call it figure A, is congruent or equal to another figure, call it figure B, and figure B is also congruent to another figure, we call it C, then figure A is also congruent or equal to figure C. And the example for that is, if segment AB is congruent to segment CD and segment CD is congruent to segment EF, then segment AB is congruent to segment EF. And the other example is, if angle A is congruent to angle B and the angle B is congruent to angle C, then angle A is congruent to angle C. For deeper understanding in using properties of congruence in identifying congruent parts and congruent figures, let's proceed to the next activity. Are you ready to practice? Identify the properties of congruence that justify the statement below. For number 1, if segment AB is congruent to segment CD, then segment CD is congruent to segment AB. The answer is symmetric property. How about for number 2? Angle SUB is congruent to angle SUB. Correct. That is reflexive property. How about for number 3? If segment FB is congruent to segment IG and segment IG is congruent to segment TW, then segment FB is congruent to segment TW. We have transitive property. Did you get it, class? To know better, let us proceed to the next activity. How are we going to apply the properties of congruence to other shapes? Let's try this one. For number 1, triangle UST is congruent to triangle UST. What property is applied? That is right. It is reflexive property of congruence. How about for number 2? If rectangle ABCD is congruent to rectangle EFGH, then rectangle EFGH is congruent to rectangle ABCD. That is correct. Symmetric property of congruence. Now, for deeper understanding on how to apply properties of congruence, let's have another activity. In this part, you are going to test further your understanding on how to apply properties of congruence and identify congruent parts and congruent figures. Try to complete its statement using the given property. For number 1, applying the reflexive property of congruence, what is the missing value? Correct! It is angle GAD. How about for number 2? Very good! That is segment UP is congruent to segment UE. And to last, we have angle O is congruent to angle B. Then, angle L is congruent to angle B. Did you get it, class? I hope so. Now, let's proceed to the next. In this lesson, you learn how to use properties of congruence in identifying congruent parts and congruent figures. Always remember that when to apply its properties of congruence in identifying congruent parts and congruent figures. Reflexive property, symmetric property, and transitive property of congruence. And that ends our lesson for today. Did you understand it very well? If not, you may go back to the lesson presented in your module or see the video again. If today's lesson is very clear to you, congratulations! You may now answer the exercises in your module. Good luck, guys! Thank you for watching!